I'm Eliza Williams, 32, a financial advisor from Boston who spent 5 years faithfully paying my parents' mortgage. When they secretly transferred their home to my younger sister Madison, I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. After sacrificing my own dreams and contributing over $100,000, discovering this betrayal at our Thanksgiving dinner shattered everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. I never imagined my own parents could deceive me so completely. Let me know where you're watching from, hit that like and subscribe button, and share if your family has ever betrayed your financial trust. Financial family drama cuts deeper than any other kind. Growing up in our modest colonial house in suburban Boston, financial struggles were a constant backdrop to our family life. My father worked at a manufacturing company, climbing from the factory floor to middle management through sheer determination. My mother balanced part-time administrative work with maintaining our home. We weren't poor, but there was always a careful attention to expenses, an awareness of limits that shaped my approach to money. Madison came along when I was 6, and from the beginning, there was a noticeable difference in how we were treated. Where I was expected to be responsible, practical and self-sufficient, Madison was encouraged to explore, create and follow her passions without much concern for practicality. I remember my 10th birthday, when I received a savings bond and practical clothes, while Madison, though not even celebrating her birthday, got a new art set simply because she had shown interest in painting that week. Madison is sensitive, my mother would explain whenever I questioned the disparity. She needs extra encouragement to thrive. This explanation became the refrain of my childhood, repeated so often it became family doctrine. I learned to be the reliable one, the one who didn't need special treatment or attention. Our personality differences only reinforced this dynamic. I was analytical and organised from an early age, carefully saving my allowance while Madison spent hers immediately on whatever caught her creative interest. I planned meticulously for school projects, while Madison would pull all-nighters producing beautiful but last-minute work that teachers somehow found refreshingly original. The summer before my senior year of high school, my father's company downsized dramatically. His position was eliminated, and though he found another job within a few months, it came with a significant pay cut. That summer changed my college plans completely. Instead of applying to the private universities I'd been considering, I focused on schools where I could get substantial scholarships. I worked 20 hours weekly at a local coffee shop throughout college, while maintaining a 3.9 GPA in my finance program. Meanwhile, Madison attended a private arts high school because she needed the right environment to nurture her creativity. When she graduated 4 years after me, our parents took out additional loans to send her to an expensive art school in New York, never once suggesting she should work part-time or consider a more affordable option. After graduating, I secured a position at a respected financial advisory firm in Boston. I lived frugally, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates to accelerate my student loan payments. By 27, I was debt-free and building my savings for a down payment on a condo. I visited my parents monthly for Sunday dinners, maintaining our relationship while establishing my independence. The family home meant everything to my parents. The modest 4-bedroom colonial had been their only major investment, purchased when my mother was pregnant with me. Every room held decades of memories: holiday gatherings in the dining room, summer barbecues on the back patio, the height, marks on the kitchen doorframe tracking our growth. My father had spent countless weekends maintaining and improving the property, building the deck himself, and planting the maple trees that now towered over the front yard. During one Sunday visit, I noticed my mother wincing when she reached for the serving dishes. Her arthritis had worsened considerably. My father, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him, kept rubbing his chest throughout dinner. When I asked about it, he brushed off my concern, but I later learned he'd been experiencing warning signs of heart problems for months. After dinner, while Madison was showing them her latest art portfolio in the living room, I cleaned up in the kitchen. My father joined me, unusually quiet as he dried the dishes I washed. "Lizzie," he finally said, using my childhood nickname, "your mother and I are having some financial difficulties." The sink water continued running as I processed his words. "What kind of difficulties?" He explained that between his reduced income, their second mortgage taken for Madison's education, and their increasing medical expenses, they had fallen behind on payments. The bank had sent a foreclosure warning. "We might lose the house," he admitted, his voice breaking. "We've never missed payments before. I don't know how to tell your mother we might have to leave her garden and all the memories we've built. Here." I turned off the water and faced him. "How much do you need to catch up?" No. He shook his head firmly. "I'm not asking you for money. I just needed someone to talk to about this. You understand finances. Maybe you can help us figure out some options." But as he showed me their mortgage statements and bills spread across the kitchen table after everyone else had gone to bed, the reality became clear. There were no simple options. They were underwater on the home with the second mortgage. Their retirement accounts had been partially depleted for medical expenses, and the monthly payments had become unsustainable on their income. Without hesitation, I heard myself say, "I'll help with the mortgage payments, just until you get back on your feet." The relief and gratitude in my father's eyes haunts me still when I remember that moment. He hugged me tightly, something he rarely did. "We'll make this right someday, Lizzie, I promise." The decision to take on my parents' mortgage payments wasn't made lightly. That night, after leaving their house, I created detailed spreadsheets analysing my budget, calculating how this additional $1,800 monthly commitment would impact my financial goals. My dream of purchasing my own condo would need to be postponed indefinitely. My emergency fund would remain minimal. My retirement contributions would stay at just enough to get the company match, rather than the aggressive savings plan I'd been following. But family comes first. That's what I had always believed. I set up automatic transfers to my parents' bank account timed with their mortgage due date. They insisted this would be temporary, just until my father qualified for full retirement benefits in a year or two. My mother cried when I showed her the confirmation of the first transfer. "We'll make this up to you," she promised, echoing my father's words. "The house has nearly 30 years of equity. We'll make sure you're compensated for everything you're doing." These vague promises of future compensation were never formalised. No documents were signed. No specific agreements were made. Just the understanding between us that my contributions wouldn't be forgotten. The first year of payments required strict budgeting on my part. I moved from my reasonably comfortable shared apartment to a significantly smaller studio further from downtown to save on rent. My social life dwindled as dinners out with friends became coffee meetups instead. Vacations became weekend staycations. Dating became nearly non-existent as I poured my energy into work, seeking promotions and raises. To ease the financial pressure, my parents expressed constant gratitude initially. Sunday dinners became a tradition where they would thank me repeatedly for my help, sometimes embarrassingly so. My father would show me the mortgage statement with pride, pointing out how the principal was finally decreasing after years of mostly interest payments. Madison, however, grew increasingly cold during these family gatherings. When our parents praised my financial help, she would interject with comments about how some people valued money too much, or how family support shouldn't be measured in dollars. She never acknowledged that her expensive education had contributed to our parents' financial strain. As the months passed into years, the dynamic shifted subtly. My parents' expressions of gratitude became less effusive, more routine. What had been extraordinary became expected. When I received a significant promotion at work after 3 years of payments, the celebration dinner at their house somehow became about Madison selling her first major artwork to a local restaurant. My contributions expanded beyond just the mortgage. When the water heater failed during the second winter, I covered the $3,000 replacement cost. When my mother's arthritis medication wasn't fully covered by insurance, I paid the difference. When property taxes increased, I adjusted my monthly transfer to cover the difference. All told, I was contributing nearly $30,000 annually to my parents' household. The mortgage, unexpected repairs, medical expenses not covered by insurance, and even holiday gifts that had become more lavish since I'd taken on their largest expense. Meanwhile, I continued living in my small studio apartment, driving my 10-year-old car, and putting my own life milestones on hold. Madison had settled into teaching art at a private elementary school in Rhode Island. Despite having a steady income, she frequently complained about money during family gatherings. Our parents responded by continuing to subsidize her lifestyle, paying half her rent for an artist-friendly apartment with good light, buying her art supplies as gifts, and funding gallery fees when she wanted to show her work. Madison needs to establish herself in the art world, my mother explained when I gently questioned these expenses. These investments will pay off when she becomes recognized. I bit my tongue, not mentioning that these investments were indirectly coming from my pocket since I was covering their largest expense. I reminded myself that supporting my parents meant supporting their choices, even when those choices frustrated me. I focused instead on the satisfaction of keeping them in their beloved home, preserving their dignity and stability as they aged. By the 5th year of this arrangement, I had contributed over $90,000 to the mortgage alone, plus at least another $30,000 in additional expenses. My own savings had stagnated. My retirement accounts were significantly below the recommended amounts for my age and income, but I told myself it was temporary, that eventually things would balance out. I believed in my parents' integrity and their promises that my sacrifice would be acknowledged. I couldn't have imagined how wrong I was. The first indication that something was changing came during a routine Sunday dinner in early spring of that 5th year. Madison arrived uncharacteristically early, bubbling with excitement that she could barely contain through the meal. "I've made a decision," she announced as my mother served dessert. "I'm moving back to be closer to you guys. I found a teaching position at Westbrook Academy starting this fall." My parents' reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. My mother gasped with delight, clapping her hands together. "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful news. We've missed having you nearby." My father beamed. "This calls for champagne. I've been saving a bottle for a special occasion." Their joy was understandable. Having both daughters nearby would be wonderful for them. I smiled and congratulated Madison, though something about her satisfied expression gave me pause. "The only problem," Madison continued once we all had, champagne flutes in hand, "is finding a place to live. Rent around here is insane, and my apartment in Providence is so perfect for my art. I don't know if I'll find anything with that kind of space and light within my budget." My father patted her hand reassuringly. "Don't worry about that now. We'll help you figure something out." The conversation moved on, but the seed of unease had been planted. My parents hadn't offered to help when I was apartment hunting on a tight budget while paying their mortgage. I dismissed the thought as petty. Our circumstances were different, and I wasn't struggling to find housing. 3 weeks later, I arrived early for dinner and overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I paused in the hallway, not intentionally eavesdropping but caught by my mother's words. It would be the perfect solution for helping Madison settle down. She needs stability more than Eliza does. "I know," my father replied, "but we need to consider how to approach this. Eliza has been so generous. We don't want to seem ungrateful." They changed the subject when they heard me enter, but the fragments lingered in my mind. What perfect solution were they considering, and why would it potentially seem ungrateful to me? The tension between Madison and me grew more pronounced at family gatherings. Her comments became increasingly pointed, especially regarding my work schedule and priorities. "Must be nice to have such a clear path," she remarked during one dinner. "Just follow the money and never worry about fulfillment or passion." I maintained a cordial facade despite the stings. Different things fulfill different people. I actually find satisfaction in helping clients secure their financial futures. "Sure," Madison smirked. "I just think there's more to life than spreadsheets and retirement accounts." My mother changed the subject quickly, but I noticed she didn't defend my choices as she once might have. Around this time, my parents began cancelling our regular lunch dates. My father had always met me monthly for lunch near my office, and my mother and I had a standing Saturday brunch date twice monthly. Suddenly they were too busy, helping Madison look at apartments, attending her art show preparations, meeting her new colleagues. I tried to ignore the mounting evidence that something had shifted, but my best friend Rachel wasn't so easily placated when I mentioned these changes during our weekly happy hour. "This sounds sketchy, Eliza," she said bluntly. You're paying their mortgage while they're focusing all their attention on Madison. I think you need to protect yourself financially. They're my parents, I defended. They've always had a soft spot for Madison because she struggles more. It doesn't mean anything sinister. Rachel gave me a skeptical look. Just promise me you'll start documenting everything you're paying for, dates, amounts, any conversations, about repayment, just in case. I laughed off her concern, but found myself creating a spreadsheet that evening, documenting every payment I'd made over the 5 years. My 32nd birthday fell on a Wednesday, and my parents suggested celebrating the following Sunday rather than on the actual day. I agreed easily, understanding their preference for weekend gatherings. But when Sunday arrived, the celebration felt perfunctory. They gave me a scarf and a generic birthday card. My father checked his watch repeatedly during dessert, and they left unusually early, explaining they had an appointment they couldn't miss. 2 weeks later, my father experienced chest pains severe enough that my mother called an ambulance. I received her panicked call while in a client meeting and rushed immediately to the hospital, arriving before the doctors had completed their initial assessment. I handled the insurance paperwork, spoke with the doctors, and stayed with my frightened mother in the waiting room. Madison arrived 3 hours later, having finished her art class before making the drive. She swept in dramatically, tearfully embracing our mother, who immediately turned all her attention to comforting Madison. "It's so awful," Madison sobbed. "I can't bear the thought of losing him." I stepped away to get coffee, giving them space while fighting my own irritation. When I returned, I overheard Madison asking our mother, "Does this change our plans for the house?" "No," my mother whispered. "If anything, it makes it more important that we move forward quickly." They stopped talking when they noticed me, and Madison gave me a strange, almost triumphant look that sent a chill through me. Whatever plans for the house they were discussing, I was clearly not part of the conversation. Thanksgiving had always been the biggest holiday in our family. My mother spent days preparing, using recipes passed down through generations. The dining room table extended with all its leaves, accommodated aunts, uncles, and cousins from both sides of the family. This year was no exception, with 15 of us squeezed around the table laden with traditional dishes. The meal progressed normally through the turkey and sides. My Uncle Robert, my father's brother, sat across from me, describing his recent fishing trip between bites of stuffing. Madison sat at the opposite end of the table, unusually animated as she chatted with our cousins about her teaching position. As my mother served pumpkin pie, Uncle Robert turned to Madison and said loud enough for the table to hear, "So, Madison, your father tells me congratulations are in order on your new house. That's quite an achievement for a young art teacher." The table didn't immediately go silent. Conversations continued around us. But in my immediate vicinity, a bubble of confusion formed. My fork paused midway to my mouth as I processed his words. "What new house?" I asked, looking between Madison and my parents. Madison straightened in her chair, a smile spreading across her face. "Oh, I thought you knew. Mum and Dad are transferring the house to me. We signed the preliminary paperwork last week." The pie turned to ash in my mouth. I looked at my parents, waiting for some explanation, some clarification that would make sense of this announcement. My father studied his dessert plate while my mother busied herself refilling water glasses. "Is that right?" I directed my question to them, fighting to keep my voice steady. My father cleared his throat. "We were going to discuss this with you privately after the holidays, Eliza. It's not quite as simple as Madison makes it sound." But Madison continued, either oblivious to or enjoying my discomfort. "The house will be in my name, but Mum and Dad will live in the in-law suite. We're going to renovate the basement to make it perfect for them. I'll take the master bedroom upstairs." The room seemed to tilt slightly. 5 years of mortgage payments, over $90,000 directly toward the house, all those promises, that my contributions would be recognised, and they had decided, without a single conversation with me, to give the house to Madison. I maintained my composure through the remainder of dessert, nodding mechanically at conversations directed my way. As soon as was politely possible, I stood to help clear dishes, needing a moment away from the table. In the kitchen, I set down the stack of plates with trembling hands. My parents followed me in, closing the door to the dining room. "We were going to tell you," my mother began. "When?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. "After the transfer was complete. After Madison moved in." My father stepped forward. "Eliza, we know how much you've helped us with the mortgage, but Madison needs stability. Her career doesn't have the same financial security yours does." "I've been paying your mortgage for 5 years," I said, the reality of the situation finally hitting me full force. 5 years of payments. All those times you said you'd make it right, that my contribution would be recognised. Was that all just nothing? "Don't be dramatic," Madison said, having slipped into the kitchen behind our parents. "It's just a house. You make enough money to buy your own place anytime you want. You just choose to prioritise work over settling down." I stared at her in disbelief. "Just a house? I've contributed over $90,000 to this just a house, while putting my own life on hold." My mother wrung her hands. "We know you've been generous, sweetheart. We thought you were helping because we're family, not because you expected something in return." The unfairness of this statement struck me like a physical blow. "I helped because you were about to lose your home, because you promised it was temporary, because you specifically said my contribution would be recognised." "And it will be," my father assured me, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Eventually. We're not planning to cut you out of our will or anything like that." "Eventually?" I repeated. "So I should just continue paying the mortgage for a house that now belongs to Madison, on the promise that someday, after you're both gone, I might receive some recognition of my contribution?" Madison crossed her arms. "No one's asking you. To keep paying the mortgage? I mean, it would be nice if you helped our parents, but if you're going to be so selfish about it..." I turned to face her fully. "Selfish? I've been paying $1,800 every month for 5 years, so they wouldn't lose this house. What exactly have you contributed during this time?" The tension in the room was broken by my aunt calling from the dining room, asking if we needed help with coffee. I took the opportunity to excuse myself, saying I needed some air. I grabbed my coat and purse, made brief apologies to the extended family, and fled to my car. Once inside, with the doors locked and the engine running, for warmth, I finally allowed the tears to come. 5 years of sacrifice. 5 years of putting my parents' needs before my own. 5 years of believing that family meant something sacred, that loyalty and sacrifice would be recognised and reciprocated. All for nothing. I called Rachel from the car, my voice breaking as I explained what had happened. She offered to come, over immediately, and I drove to my small apartment in a daze, the reality of the betrayal sinking deeper with every mile. The week following Thanksgiving passed in a blur of missed calls from my parents and emotional numbness. I took 2 sick days from work, something I'd never done before, unable to focus on client portfolios when my own financial situation had been built on such shaky foundations of trust. Sleep became elusive. I would lie awake replaying years of conversations, searching for hints I should have noticed, warnings I should have heeded. My appetite vanished. Coffee became my primary sustenance as I obsessively compiled records of every contribution I'd made to my parents' household. Rachel stayed with me that first weekend, forcing me to eat soup and bread she'd brought over. "You need to talk to someone professional about this," she insisted as I picked at my food. "This is financial abuse, Eliza, family or not." On Monday, I approached Derek, a colleague who specialised in property law before joining our financial firm. I laid out the situation as clinically as possible, though my voice still shook at certain points. Derek's expression grew increasingly grave as I explained the verbal agreements, the years of payments, and the sudden transfer of property to my sister. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "I wish I had better news, Eliza. Without written agreements or your name on any documents, legally speaking, these were gifts. You might have a case for verbal contract, but those are extremely difficult to prove, especially in family situations. So they can just take all that money and give the house to my sister? There's nothing I can do. I didn't say that, Derek clarified. You have options, but they're all messy. You could sue for unjust enrichment, but that would mean taking your family to court. Before going nuclear, I'd suggest having a formal demand letter drafted by an attorney. Sometimes the threat of legal action is enough. I thanked him and returned to my office, feeling hollow. The thought of suing my parents seemed unimaginable, yet so did accepting this betrayal without consequence. That evening, I created the most detailed financial analysis I'd ever produced. Every mortgage payment, every home repair, every medical bill I'd covered, all meticulously documented with dates, amounts, and circumstances. The final tally made me physically ill. $108,460 in mortgage payments, plus an additional $37,192 in other expenses over 5 years. Nearly $150,000. More than enough for a down payment on my own home. Years of retirement savings, countless opportunities and experiences sacrificed. I searched through years of emails and text messages, finding dozens of references from my parents about making things right someday and recognizing my contribution when their situation improved. In one particularly painful email from my father on the 2nd anniversary of my taking over the mortgage, he wrote, "What you're doing for us will not be forgotten. This house has been our family's anchor, and your sacrifice is ensuring it remains in our family for the next generation." Just not for me, apparently. The depth of the betrayal settled into my bones as I realized how completely I'd been used. I'd been the reliable one, the responsible one, the one they could count on, and they had counted on that reliability while planning to reward Madison instead. After 2 weeks of agonizing, I made the decision to stop the automatic mortgage payments. The next payment would have been processed in 3 days. I called the bank and cancelled the transfer, then sent a simple text to my parents. "I've stopped the mortgage payments effective immediately. We need to discuss repayment of the funds I've contributed over the past 5 years. The response was immediate and panicked. First came pleading phone calls, which I let go to voicemail. Then my father showed up at my workplace, only to be told I was in meetings all day. My mother sent tearful voice messages about how they couldn't afford the mortgage on their own, and how they thought I wanted to help without strings attached. Madison's reaction was the most revealing. Her text message read, "Way to abandon the family when they need you most. I always knew you only cared about money. Some daughter you are." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I scheduled an appointment with a therapist specializing in family trauma. Dr. Bennett listened carefully to my story during our first session, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she set her notepad aside. "What you're describing is a lifelong pattern of family dynamics, not just a single incident of betrayal," she observed. "You were cast as the responsible provider, while your sister was allowed to be the one who needed support and protection. Your parents have exploited that dynamic your entire life, and this house situation is simply its most extreme manifestation." Her words unlocked something in me, permission to see the larger pattern rather than just this single betrayal. We spent the next several sessions exploring childhood memories I'd never examined critically. The different expectations, the unequal distribution of family resources, the subtle messaging that my worth was tied to what I could provide rather than who I was. "You've been enabling an unhealthy dynamic," Dr. Bennett explained in our 4th session. "By consistently being the rescuer, you've allowed your parents and sister to avoid the natural consequences of their financial decisions." "So this is my fault?" I asked, tears threatening. "Not at all. You acted from love and family loyalty. But recognizing your role in the dynamic is the first step to changing it. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for healthy relationships." With Dr. Bennett's guidance, I began to see that stopping the mortgage payments wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about breaking a lifelong pattern that was harming all of us, even if I was the only one who could see it. After 3 weeks of unanswered calls and minimal communication, I texted my parents and Madison requesting a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet cafe equidistant from our homes. I specified that I would only meet if all 3 of them attended and that I expected an uninterrupted opportunity to speak. They agreed immediately, clearly relieved that I was finally willing to talk. I spent the night before the meeting preparing, organising my documentation, and rehearsing what I needed to say with Dr. Bennett's help. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy. I ordered a black coffee, arranged my folder of financial records beside it, and waited. They arrived together, my parents looking anxious, Madison with a defiant expression that faltered slightly when she saw the folder. "Thank you for coming," I began once they were seated. "I've given myself some time to process what happened at Thanksgiving and to consider our path forward." My father interrupted immediately. "Lizzie, we never meant to hurt you. We're so sorry about how everything came out. We should have discussed it with you first." "You're right, you should have," I agreed calmly. "But this conversation isn't about the lack of communication. It's about the 5 years of financial contributions I've made based on promises that have now been broken." My mother reached for my hand, which I subtly moved to my coffee cup. "Sweetheart, we appreciate everything you've done. We couldn't have kept the house without you, but we never promised you ownership." "Actually, you did imply exactly that, multiple times." I opened my folder and slid across printouts of emails and text messages I'd highlighted. "These are just a sample of the communications where you specifically mentioned recognizing my contribution when it came to the house's future." My father scanned the pages, his expression falling. "We didn't mean to mislead you, Madison needs this security more than you do. Your career is established. You're financially stable." "I'm financially stable despite contributing nearly $150,000 to your household over 5 years. I placed the complete financial record in front of them. "This spreadsheet details every payment: mortgage, repairs, medical bills, and emergency funds. This money was provided with the understanding that it was an investment in our family's future, not a gift to be distributed however you chose." Madison, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "So this is all about money for you, not about helping our parents keep their home. Some daughter you are." I turned to her, maintaining my composure. "This is about integrity and honesty. If they had told me 5 years ago that my contributions would result in you receiving the house, I would have made different choices. I might still have helped, but with clear expectations and probably in a different way." "We can't undo the transfer now," my father said weakly. "The paperwork is being processed." "I'm not asking you to undo it," I clarified. "I'm requesting a repayment plan for the funds I've contributed. I've calculated monthly payments that would be reasonable based on your income. Alternatively, you could take out a home equity loan for the lump sum." The shock on their faces would have been comical in any other context. "You expect us to pay you back?" My mother's voice rose. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "You mean raising me? Providing the basic necessities of childhood? Is that now something I'm expected to repay with unlimited financial support? And no boundaries?" "That's not what she meant," my father interjected. "Then what did she mean?" I pressed. "Because from where I sit, I've been the one providing for this family for 5 years. I've sacrificed my own financial security, my own home ownership dreams, my own retirement planning, all to help you. And in return, you've given the house to Madison without a single conversation with me about it." Madison stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're just jealous because Mom and Dad recognise that I need help while you've always been self-sufficient. Not everything is about money, Eliza. Some things are about family loyalty." "Family loyalty works both ways," I replied evenly. "And this isn't about jealousy. It's about being treated fairly and honestly." I laid out my terms clearly: either a formal repayment plan with monthly payments, or a lump sum from a home equity loan on the house that was now being transferred to Madison. I explained that I had consulted with an attorney who believed I had grounds for a case of fraud based on the documented promises and pattern of payments. "I don't want to take legal action," I concluded, "but I will if necessary. This isn't a negotiation or a threat. It's simply me advocating for myself after years of putting everyone else first." The meeting ended with tension thick enough to cut. My parents promised to think about it, while Madison stormed out, calling me heartless and greedy. I remained at the cafe after they left, hands shaking but mind clear. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing up for my own worth rather than sacrificing it for family approval. The fallout was immediate and extensive. Extended. Family members soon took sides after hearing different versions of the story. Some cousins reached out to express support for me, saying they'd always noticed the disparity in how my sister and I were treated. Others sent judgmental messages about money coming between family. A week after our cafe confrontation, my neighbour, Susan, called to tell me she'd seen moving boxes being delivered to my parents' house. When I didn't respond to this news, my father left a voicemail explaining they were helping Madison move her things in earlier than planned, since the current situation has accelerated our timeline. The bank sent the first missed mortgage payment, noticed 3 weeks after I stopped the transfers. My mother called crying, saying they couldn't afford the payment and asking if I would reconsider, just until things settle down. I remained firm, suggesting again that a home equity loan would solve the immediate problem while beginning to address the repayment I was requesting. Madison struggled with the sudden responsibility of home ownership. She called one weekend in, a panic because the water heater had failed, the same water heater I had replaced 3 years earlier. "This is an emergency," she insisted. "I can't afford to replace it on my teacher's salary." "That's a challenge many homeowners face," I replied calmly. "You might want to look into emergency home repair loans." The bank sent a foreclosure warning after 3 missed payments. My parents were forced to withdraw money from their already diminished retirement accounts to cover the arrears. Madison complained loudly on social media about toxic family members, without naming me directly, but mutual acquaintances messaged me asking what was happening. Through it all, I maintained my boundaries while working through my complex emotions with Dr. Bennett. The guilt was overwhelming at times. The lifetime of conditioning to be the family fixer was difficult to overcome, but beneath the guilt was a growing sense of righteous anger and, surprisingly, relief. The weight of financial responsibility for my parents had been lifted, allowing me to focus on my own needs for perhaps the first time in my adult life. "Your parents and sister are experiencing the natural consequences of their choices," Dr. Bennett reminded me during a particularly difficult session after my mother had called sobbing about bill collectors. "This discomfort is necessary for them to recognise the reality of their financial situation, a reality you've been sheltering them from for years." I held firm to this perspective, though it wasn't easy. The hardest part was letting go of the family role I'd occupied for so long. If I wasn't the responsible provider, the reliable daughter, the financial safety net, then who was I? Finding the answer to that question became my new focus. 6 months after our confrontation at the cafe, I received an unexpected email from my father with the subject line, "Proposed repayment plan." The message was formal, almost businesslike, a stark contrast to his usual communications. "After considerable reflection and consultation with our financial advisor," he wrote, "we recognise the substantial contribution you've made to our family home over the past 5 years. We propose the following repayment plan." The email outlined 3 sources of funds. They would sell several valuable family heirlooms, including my grandmother's antique jewellery collection. They would take out a modest home equity loan, with Madison as co-signer since the house was now in her name, and they would make monthly payments of $500 for 5 years to cover the remainder. The total repayment came to approximately 70% of what I had contributed, not everything, but significantly more than I had expected to recover. A formal agreement was attached, drafted by an attorney, acknowledging my contributions and detailing the repayment terms. I forwarded the email to my own attorney, who advised that the terms were reasonable and the document legally sound. After a few days of consideration, I signed the agreement and returned it without additional comment. 2 weeks later, I received another unexpected communication, a handwritten letter from Madison. I almost discarded it unread, but decided to give her one final opportunity to be heard. "Eliza," the letter began, "I've spent months being angry at you for demanding repayment, for stopping the mortgage payments, for what I saw as abandoning our parents. It's taken me this long to recognize some uncomfortable truths about our family dynamic and my role in it. She went on to acknowledge that she had benefited from our parents' favoritism throughout our lives without questioning it. The experience of taking on full financial responsibility for the house had been a harsh awakening, forcing her to recognize the magnitude of what I had been handling silently for years. While I still believe Mum and Dad's decision to transfer the house to me came from a place of love, I can now see how deeply unfair it was to you after everything you contributed. I was entitled and blind to my own privilege within our family. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging that I understand better now. The letter concluded with a tentative invitation to meet for coffee when I felt ready. I set it aside, not yet prepared to rebuild that relationship, but appreciating the first steps toward accountability. My journey of emotional healing continued with Dr. Bennett's guidance. We worked through the complex grief of losing my idealized version of my family, the anger at years of exploitation, and the fear of establishing a new identity separate from my role as the family provider. Family patterns don't change overnight, she reminded me. Your parents and sister may never fully understand or validate your perspective. Healing means accepting that limitation while still honoring your own truth. This wisdom became my touchstone as I rebuilt my life with newly established boundaries. The first installment of the repayment arrived on schedule, and I used it as the down payment on a one-bedroom condo in a neighbourhood I'd always admired. After years of postponing my own dreams, taking this step felt simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. My new home became a physical manifestation of my psychological transformation. I furnished it thoughtfully, creating a space that reflected my values and preferences rather than just practicality. The wall art featured maps of places I hoped to visit now that my finances were my own again. The kitchen contained quality cookware for the elaborate meals I'd always wanted to learn to prepare, but never had time for when working overtime to cover family expenses. 3 months after receiving Madison's letter, I agreed to meet her for coffee. The conversation was awkward, but more authentic than any we'd had in years. She shared her struggles with the house, the responsibilities she hadn't anticipated, the financial strain despite our parents' contributions toward the mortgage. I always thought you had everything figured out, she admitted. It never occurred to me how much you were sacrificing or how hard you were working. I just saw the successful career and assumed everything came easily to you. Nothing came easily, I replied. I just made different choices. This conversation marked the beginning of a new relationship between us, not the instant closeness of Hollywood reconciliations, but a tentative respect that acknowledged our different paths without judgment. My relationship with my parents evolved more slowly. We began with monthly dinners at a restaurant, neutral territory that eliminated the emotional weight of the family home. I maintained firm boundaries about financial discussions, changing the subject whenever they hinted at money troubles or made oblique references to assistance. Gradually, we established a new normal based on emotional rather than financial connection. They shared health updates and stories about neighbours. I told them about projects at work and my explorations of the city from my new home base. We didn't discuss the past or make promises about the future. We simply existed in the present, learning to know each other as adults with separate lives rather than as financial provider and recipients. By the 1-year anniversary of the Thanksgiving revelation, I had received almost half of the agreed-upon repayment. My emergency fund was fully restored, my retirement contributions were back on track, and I was planning my first international vacation in years, a 2-week exploration of Portugal that I would never have considered while carrying my family's financial burden. The most profound change wasn't financial but emotional. I no longer measured my worth by what I could provide to others. I learned to validate my own needs rather than dismissing them as selfish or unimportant. I discovered that setting boundaries wasn't cruel but necessary for authentic relationships. The greatest gift we can give others, Dr. Bennett told me in one of our final regular sessions, is our authentic self rather than our depleted martyr self. By reclaiming your autonomy, you've actually created the possibility of healthier relationships with your family in the long run. I carry this wisdom with me daily. The journey from betrayal to self-reclamation hasn't been easy or linear. There are still days when guilt creeps in, when I question whether I've been too harsh or demanding. But these moments pass more quickly, now, replaced by the steady certainty that I deserve the same consideration I've always given others. If my story resonates with you, perhaps you're facing your own family financial entanglements or struggling with boundaries. Remember that supporting family doesn't mean sacrificing your future, and love doesn't require erasing your own needs. Have you experienced a similar family financial betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like this video. If it helped you see family financial dynamics more clearly, subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family situations and share with someone who might need permission to set their own boundaries. Thank you for witnessing my journey from betrayal to empowerment. May you find the courage to honor your own worth, whatever that looks like in your life.